The Foreign and Commonwealth Office and a press briefing entitled Copenhagen in the Balance, and a chance for both the Foreign Secretary and the Energy Secretary to voice their concerns.
You'll know that for some time it's been the position of the British government that climate change is not just an environmental issue, it's an economic issue, a security issue, and therefore a foreign policy issue. It's a foreign policy issue because it involves very complex international negotiations, but also because of the foreign policy consequences of the sort of climate changes that are underway. And I want to say a few words about that. But the purpose of this press briefing is actually very simple. And that is reflected in the title that you can see behind me, that the deal that the world needs in Copenhagen is now in the balance. There is a real danger that the talks scheduled for December will not reach a positive outcome. And there is an equal danger that in the run-up to Copenhagen, people don't wake up to the danger of failure until it is too late. So this press conference and the attendant activity this week is intended to tackle those dangers. The problem is not that the need is somehow less urgent. In fact, all the science that's been produced over the last year shows growing urgency. Nor is the problem that somehow the technology is not available. I'll be visiting some working carbon capture and storage facilities in Rotterdam tomorrow. Rather, I think the danger arises in part from the complexity of the issues raised by climate change, in part the fact that there are other very big questions crowding the international political agenda. And also, we have to be honest, there is a suspicion, a deep suspicion, between the developed and the developing worlds about motivation and about intentions. So we have to overcome all those dangers. I think there's a pressing need to remind people what is at stake, and a pressing need to mobilize the resources of international diplomacy to try to secure a deal.
Concerns on the Copenhagen talks too from the Energy and Climate Change Secretary.
I think it's right to say that they hang in the balance, and I think David is also right to say that the dangers and risks are that these negotiations pass people by. My fear has always been that this remains something that the people in the negotiating room care about and understand, but doesn't have wider public understanding. I think that is a big danger in this process, because these negotiations are too important for that. They're too important for the poorest countries of the world, like Bangladesh, that I recently visited, because climate change is a current reality there. It's not some future theoretical prospect. It is happening now. I went to visit people living on the shores or sandbanks in Bangladesh. There are about 2 million people in Bangladesh living in those circumstances. They are already seeing the effects of worse flooding than normal, higher water levels on their way of life. And whether we can get a Copenhagen deal, and I'll say something about this in a minute, which helps finance the adaptation that would be required for those people, is going to be a key determinant of their survival in the future. For future generations, I think in all countries, there is a profound and dramatic interest in getting a deal now. All the evidence is that the longer we wait, the worse the problem will get, the higher the costs will be. And I think it's also important to say, and this is something that I've learned in this job, this is not just about disaster avoidance, important though that is. It is also about saying, how do we build the economy of the future around low carbon, also on which a deal depends, and how do we, and David referred to this, how do we get energy security for countries, and only if we have certainty about the transition to low carbon, not just in the UK but elsewhere, will business have the confidence to invest, and will we be able to make that prosperity happen. So for all those reasons, we think these are very important negotiations and need to be highlighted as such.
All countries, they said, had to get involved.
I think it's fair to say that in our domestic legislation in the UK, and also in the proposals that the Prime Minister has put forward on climate financing, the UK has established itself as a world leader in the climate change debate. We now need to use that leverage to do everything we can to get a positive deal at Copenhagen, a deal which at the moment hangs in the balance.
Strong warnings on the future. Mr. David Miliband is expected to tour Europe this week. Further moves to make a case for a deal in Copenhagen.